Emily thought she had found the love of her life until Ryan turned her world into a prison. What started as a dream relationship quickly spiraled into a nightmare of control, isolation, and fear. For 9 months, she lived under his watchful eye, every move monitored, every decision stripped away. But when she discovered she was pregnant, the stakes became higher than ever. With no money, no freedom, and nowhere to turn, Emily knew she had only one choice: escape or risk losing everything. What happened next would shock everyone. Emily Carter had always been independent, determined to build the life she had always dreamed of. At 27, she had just moved to New York City after landing a position at a prestigious marketing firm. It was the opportunity she had worked so hard for, and she embraced it with excitement, eager to start fresh in a city that promised endless possibilities. Her apartment was small but charming, nestled in a quiet neighborhood that felt safe and inviting. Life seemed to be falling perfectly into place. Her days were filled with work, meetings, and the thrill of learning new skills in her career. She made a few friends at the office, often joining them for after-work drinks or weekend outings. It felt like the beginning of something incredible, a new chapter where she was fully in control of her own destiny. Then she met Ryan Parker. Ryan was everything she had imagined in a partner: confident, successful, and effortlessly charismatic. He worked in finance, had a sharp sense of humor, and seemed genuinely interested in everything about her. Their connection was instant, and soon they were inseparable. He showered her with attention, remembering small details about their conversations, sending her flowers just because, and making her feel like the most important person in the world. He spoke of a future together, of traveling to far-off places, and building a life that seemed like something out of a dream. Their relationship moved quickly, but Emily wasn't concerned. It felt natural, as though they were meant to be together. Within just a few months, they spent nearly every night at his luxurious apartment in Midtown. He cooked for her, introduced her to his friends, and made her feel safe. When he suggested that she move in with him permanently, she hesitated at first. She loved her independence, loved having her own space. But Ryan made a convincing argument. Her lease was ending, and it made sense financially. More than that, he assured her that it was the next step in their journey together. Emily convinced herself it was the right decision. Love meant compromise, and she loved Ryan. But almost immediately after she moved in, things began to change. At first, it was subtle. Ryan started making comments about the way she dressed, suggesting she should be more modest, more refined. He began questioning her about her friends, expressing concern about the people she spent time with. He would text her constantly while she was at work, asking who she was with and what she was doing. At first, she saw it as endearing, a sign that he cared deeply. But soon, his concern turned into something else, an expectation that she should always be available to him, always be within reach. The first real warning sign came when she decided to meet a coworker for coffee after work. She had told Ryan her plans in advance, yet when she got home, he was furious. He accused her of ignoring him, of prioritizing others over their relationship. His reaction was so intense that she found herself apologizing, reassuring him that it wouldn't happen again. He softened immediately, pulling her into an embrace and telling her he just loved her too much to lose her. It was the first time Emily felt uneasy, but she pushed the feeling aside. She had no way of knowing that this was only the beginning of a nightmare that would consume the next 9 months of her life. The moment Emily moved in, the warmth and affection Ryan had once showered her with began to shift into something much darker. The apartment, once a place of comfort and romance, now felt suffocating. Ryan's presence was no longer just reassuring. It was overbearing, inescapable. He wanted to know everything: where she was, who she spoke to, what she thought. His concern had transformed into control, and soon she realized that nothing she did was ever truly her own decision. At first, it was small things. He would casually ask to check her phone, claiming it was just out of curiosity or a playful habit. When she hesitated, he would laugh it off, but the request came again the next day, and then again. Soon, it wasn't a request anymore. He would take her phone from her hands, scroll through her messages, check her call logs, and question every male contact she had. If she protested, he would accuse her of hiding something. It was easier to let him do it than to start an argument. Her friendships were the next thing to disappear. Ryan found reasons to dislike everyone in her life. He convinced her that her coworkers were jealous, that her best friend was influencing her negatively, that her family didn't truly support their relationship. Slowly, she found herself distancing from them, first out of guilt, then out of exhaustion. The constant arguments whenever she mentioned spending time with others drained her until she stopped trying. It was simpler to stay home. It was easier to let Ryan be the center of her world. Then came the financial control. Ryan suggested that since they lived together, it would be best to combine their expenses. He took over handling bills, telling her it was just more practical that way. He encouraged her to close out her personal accounts, assuring her that they were building a life together and that everything he had was hers. At first, it felt like a sign of commitment. Then she realized she no longer had access to her own money. She had to ask for anything she needed, and each request became an opportunity for him to remind her how much he provided for her, how lucky she was to have him. Soon, even her work wasn't safe. He hated that she spent so much time away from him, constantly questioning why she needed a career when he could support them both. The questions turned into arguments, and the arguments turned into long, exhausting nights where he would accuse her of wanting to leave him. She started missing meetings, coming in late, and making excuses for why she couldn't focus. Her job, the career she had once loved, now felt like an unbearable weight she carried each day. Emily barely recognized herself anymore. She had been strong, independent, and full of life. Now she was isolated, financially dependent, and living under constant scrutiny. Every move she made was watched, every decision questioned. The walls of Ryan's apartment had become her prison, and with every passing day, the idea of escape seemed more impossible. Emily's life had become a cycle of fear, control, and silent desperation. Every day felt like a battle where she carefully measured her words and actions to avoid setting Ryan off. The person she had once been, confident, ambitious, independent, was fading, replaced by someone who moved cautiously, spoke softly, and constantly second-guessed herself. Sleep became a rare luxury, replaced by nights spent lying awake, listening to the sound of Ryan breathing beside her, dreading what the next day would bring. Then everything changed when she discovered she was pregnant. The realization hit her like a tidal wave, a mix of overwhelming emotions swirling inside her. Fear, shock, disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. A baby meant a permanent connection to Ryan, a tether she couldn't easily break. It also meant that whatever control he had over her now would only intensify. She had seen glimpses of his rage, of his need to dominate every aspect of her life. What would he do once he knew she was carrying his child? For days, she kept the secret to herself, unsure of how to process it. But she couldn't hide it forever. When she finally told Ryan, his reaction was nothing like he had expected. He was ecstatic, acting as if this was the final piece that would solidify their relationship. He spoke about their future as a family, about how she wouldn't need to work anymore, about how she would be the perfect mother. His grip on her life tightened even further. Her schedule became entirely dictated by him. He accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, monitored what she ate, and decided who she could speak to. He convinced her to quit her job, insisting that she needed to focus on the pregnancy. Without her career, without her income, she felt more powerless than ever. Her world had shrunk to the confines of their home, where Ryan's presence loomed over her every second of the day. As the weeks passed, the reality of her situation became unbearable. The baby growing inside her deserved better than this life. She deserved better. She had ignored the warning signs for too long, but now she had no choice but to face the truth. If she didn't escape, she might never get another chance. But escaping wouldn't be easy. Ryan controlled everything: her phone, her money, her transportation. She couldn't just walk out the door. Every attempt at pushing back, every hint at wanting space was met with manipulation, anger, or threats. She needed a plan. She started observing, taking mental notes of his routines, his weak spots. She found small ways to regain control, hiding cash when he wasn't looking, memorizing important phone numbers, pretending to be obedient while quietly plotting her way out. The fear never left her, but now it had a purpose. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the life growing inside her, for a future where she could finally be free. Emily knew that escaping Ryan wouldn't be easy. His control over her life was nearly absolute, and she had no doubt that if he suspected she was planning to leave, his reaction would be severe. Every move she made had to be careful, calculated. She couldn't afford a single mistake. She started small. Whenever Ryan left for errands or meetings, she searched for anything that could help her. Important documents, her birth certificate, social security card, and passport were locked away in his office, but she found a way to retrieve them when he was in the shower. She tucked them into a hidden compartment in her purse, knowing she couldn't carry them openly without arousing suspicion. Money was another challenge. Without a job and no access to their shared accounts, she had to be creative. She began skimming small amounts of cash from grocery trips, pocketing a few dollars at a time when paying in cash. It wasn't much, but over several weeks, it started to add up. She hid the money inside an old book on the highest shelf of their closet, a place Ryan never checked. Her biggest hurdle was communication. Ryan monitored her phone, often demanding to see her call logs and messages. Any attempt to reach out for help had to be subtle. She considered telling a doctor during one of her appointments, but Ryan insisted on being in the room with her. There was no safe moment to whisper for help, no opportunity to pass a note without him noticing. Then she found an opening. One afternoon, Ryan received an urgent work call and had to leave for a last-minute meeting. It was rare for him to leave her alone, but the situation seemed serious enough that he had no choice. The moment the door closed behind him, Emily grabbed her phone and searched for the number of an old friend she hadn't spoken to in months, Madison. Before Ryan, Madison had been her closest confidante, and she prayed that her friend would answer. Madison picked up after the second ring. Emily kept her voice low, her hands shaking as she explained the situation. She didn't have time for details, only enough to say that she needed help. Madison didn't hesitate. She would come that night, and they would leave together. Emily hung up just as Ryan's car pulled back into the driveway. She shoved her phone under a couch cushion, forcing herself to appear normal. Her heart pounded as he walked in, scanning her with sharp eyes. Had he sensed something? Did he know? The rest of the evening was unbearable. Every second felt stretched, her fear mounting with each passing moment. She forced herself to eat, to nod at his conversations, to pretend everything was fine. Inside, she was screaming. By midnight, Ryan was asleep. Emily slipped out of bed, grabbed her hidden bag, and crept toward the front door. The moment her fingers touched the handle, headlights flashed through the window. Madison had arrived. It was time to run. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for the door handle. Every muscle in her body was tense, every breath shallow and uneven. The headlights outside cast long shadows across the living room, making her feel as if Ryan's presence still loomed over her, even as he slept in the next room. If she made a noise, if she hesitated for even a second too long, he would wake up. And if he caught her trying to leave, she knew there would be no second chance. She carefully turned the lock, pulling the door open just enough to slip outside. The cold night air hit her skin, but she didn't stop to feel relief. Madison was already in the driver's seat, her face set with urgency. Emily rushed to the car, climbing in as quietly as possible before shutting the door behind her. The moment she was inside, Madison hit the gas. The tires rolled over the pavement with a quiet hum, but to Emily, it was the loudest sound in the world. She kept her eyes fixed on the house, half expecting Ryan to come storming out at any second. But the house remained dark and still as they disappeared down the road. It wasn't until they were miles away that Emily let herself breathe. Madison didn't ask questions. She knew, in the way only a best friend could, that now wasn't the time for words. She simply reached over and squeezed Emily's hand, letting her know she wasn't alone anymore. They drove through the night, all stopping only when exhaustion forced them to. Emily was terrified to use her credit card, knowing Ryan could track transactions, so they paid for gas and food in cash. Every moment felt like a race against time, as if at any second, Ryan would find them. By morning, they reached a small town far from the city. Madison had connections there, people who could help. She took Emily to a women's shelter, a safe place where she could finally stop running. The moment Emily stepped inside, a weight she had carried for months began to lift. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, legal consultations, and whispered fears. The shelter's staff helped her file for a restraining order, advising her on the best steps to ensure her safety. With Madison's help, she contacted her family, who had been searching for her, desperate to know she was okay. Ryan's reaction was immediate. Furious messages, threats, pleas for her to return. But Emily didn't respond. She didn't have to. She was done being controlled. Months later, she stood in a courtroom facing the man who had once dictated every aspect of her life. With a steady voice, she recounted the torment she had endured. And when the judge granted her full protection, when she finally walked out of that courthouse a free woman, she knew she had survived. Emily had spent 9 months in a living hell, but now she was free.